r/Nosleep. Posted by u/Go Navy 27. My city has been cut off from the world and overrun with monsters. I have a set of rules to stay alive. Well, this is it, folks, the end of the end. So, here we are. The end of the end. I think it's probably pretty self-explanatory by the title of this post, but this will be the last you hear from me for a while. I know, absolutely tragic. You'll miss me like crazy. At least I like to think you will. Trust me, I'll miss sharing with you guys too. But you'll understand why when you've gotten to the end. I hope. Let's just start with where I left off about a week ago. We'd made it out of the dome. I passed out very anticlimactically. Great stuff. Then we spent our first few days of freedom recovering and figuring out our plans. At first, we had some options, but then our plans kind of chose us. After I drifted in and out of consciousness for a while, I finally woke up for good from my unintentional nap and treated my injuries as best I could, with Zoe's help, and then I went to go join Zoe on the couch, where she was waiting for me by rereading her dad's old copy of To Kill a Mockingbird, because yes, that's one of the few possessions she made sure to bring out of the dome with her. Priorities, you know? I wanted you to see what real courage is, instead of getting the idea that courage is a man with a gun in his hand. It's when you know you're licked before you begin but you begin anyway and see it through no matter what, she said without looking up. I was taken aback. Thanks, I said. I agree, I guess. She closed the book and turned to face me, sitting cross-legged on the couch cushion. She also rolled her eyes impressively hard. It's a quote from the book, dumbass, she told me. A great quote. Oh, right, I said, like I'd known all along. I hadn't. Then a silence settled over us. I was also facing her, but only had my left leg pulled up onto the couch, with my right dangling over the side. The ankle was bandaged so thickly that I couldn't have fit a shoe over it if I tried, so my bare foot hung there awkwardly. I was way past the point of being embarrassed, though. I mean, god damn it, I busted my ankle escaping a monster-infested city doomed by the government after an entire year. It's a worthy battle wound if there ever was one. I'd helped Zoe pop her shoulder back into place earlier, too, if you were wondering. Not as hard as you'd think. It was still kind of swollen, and she couldn't move it much, but she'd said the pain had lessened significantly as soon as it was back in place. So, hey, improvement. Now, we sat there looking at each other in silence, still beat up but slightly less so, and it was a peaceful silence. Or, it should have been, but my heart had started pounding like a drum, because I'd decided it was time. I should have told her days ago. Hell, maybe even weeks ago. But better late than never. I opened my mouth and no sound came out. She was looking at me expectantly, eyebrows raised. Any minute now would be great. Eli, come on. You've killed monsters, this shouldn't be that hard. Are you okay? She finally asked. Is it your ankle? I shook my head no, opened my mouth again. Closed it, and then I just blurted it out. It was like a switch instantaneously flipped in my head. God, nothing's wrong, it's just that I love you. Oh my God, it feels so good to tell you. I love you, Zoe. You're the most amazing person, I mean, girl, well, person too, and I love you so much. And I totally understand if you don't feel the same, but I just had to tell you and I should have told you earlier. When I finished, I was sweating like a madman. Zoe looked at me for a long moment, and then she simply burst out laughing. I'll be honest, I was confused. Should I be offended? Worried? I'd been hoping for something more along the lines of I love you too. What the hell did I do with that response? I didn't realize I was being so funny, I said. She wiped tears from her eyes and slowed down her laughter. Oh God, Eli, I'm so sorry for laughing. But don't you remember that you already told me? My heart nearly stopped. What? She smiled and took my hand in her good one. You told me earlier when you were awake for a while between your unconscious bouts. You were very adamant that I needed to know how you feel. I'm pretty sure you told me about 6 times. In several different ways. You really don't remember any of them? I was blushing harder than I'd had when we'd talked about dates, and that's really saying something. No, I mumbled. Well, you did. You were a little less flustered those times, actually. Must have been the fever. Or the concussion. Or both. She shrugged, giving me a little smirk. Too bad you don't remember, because I gave you an answer, and my answer's the same now as it was a few hours ago. My heart was hammering out of my chest again. I don't suppose you'd mind repeating it just one more time? She moved a little closer. if you ask nicely. I moved closer too. I was pretty sure I was sweating through my shirt right now. Please, I whispered. Our faces weren't far apart now. And sure, we'd been this close to each other plenty of times before. She'd fallen asleep with her head on my chest for over a month, she'd kissed me on the cheek multiple times. But this was different. She smiled, and it was the kind of smile that lit up a room. "Eli, I love the hell out of you," she said. "Now kiss me already." So I did. And it was the best moment of my life. You know how at the end of The Princess Bride, they talk about the 5 most passionate and pure kisses of all time, and how Wesley and Buttercup's kiss left them all behind? Yeah, I'm pretty sure my kiss with Zoe left even that kiss behind. Sparks may literally have flown. And that's as much as I'm telling all of you. The rest of what happened is between me and Zoe. Speculate all you want, you're not getting anything further from me about that night. Well, except that it led to the best part of all, Zoe's officially my girlfriend. That's right. This is not a drill. It's official, and I've never been happier. Who cares about my fucking ankle when I'm dating the best girl on the planet? I mean, I ruined my own plan to tell her I loved her by telling her when I was semi-conscious, but I don't even care about my embarrassment either. Because it worked out and I'm thrilled. About that, anyway. But not everything's perfect. See, the next morning we made breakfast and started our investigations about the experiment. I figured there had to be news stories about the dome somewhere, because it's a giant fucking dome enclosing an entire city, but there weren't. None. Nada. Nothing about any kind of monsters, either. The only remotely helpful things I found were a few local news reports from last February about the suburbs surrounding the city being evacuated. I remembered that being on the news just days before the dome appeared, they'd claimed it was due to a gas leak or something, and there'd been a lot of protests about leaving for such a vague threat. But ultimately most people had left, because government officials came out and forced them to, and then it seemed more serious. And then the dome appeared, and now I'm pretty damn sure the gas leak was made up to get people away from the city outskirts so they wouldn't see it happen. And so their houses could be used as secret elevators. Typical. The combination of this evacuation and the lack of other news about the dome in the entire past year led us to a big conclusion: the media is in on it. Maybe the government's paying them off. Maybe there's some kind of deal between them. I don't know. But it sure seems likely that if we were to try to go public through traditional methods with our story, we'd end up dead or in jail. Not to mention what would happen to Waffles. He's still here with us, after all. If we went to the media, I guarantee Waffles would either be killed or shown off like a circus freak. And we're not about to let them happen to him. All this to say that we realized pretty quickly that the media wasn't an option. Honestly, we figured my stories were actually our best bet at people finding out what happened. I still don't want to be too specific with locations until we know more about the organization behind this and what they're capable of and how deep their roots go, but at least it's something. Which leads to the next problem, and to how our plans kind of chose us. Because a few days after conducting all this research, and after I took several hours to type out our escape and encounter with Nolan, never would have thought Tristan would turn out to be the better of those two brothers, but here we are. We turned on the news. You know how Nolan said the rest of the scientists had left him behind to move on to the next city, preparing for the next trial? And how we hoped us blowing up everything and getting out would delay them for a while. Yeah, we were 100% wrong. On the news, there were a lot of stories we didn't care about. What else is new? Sports updates, some celebrity bullshit, the usual. Some stuff about the pandemic, too. That was admittedly pretty wild. Don't worry, Zoe and I already found face masks to use. But there was also one random channel, a fuzzy, static-filled one, that was broadcasting about a city a few hundred miles away. A city whose suburbs were currently being evacuated due to an incoming storm, though the storm had seemingly appeared out of nowhere, leaving meteorologists baffled. Sure, it could have been a real tropical storm. But it all felt just as weird as the announcements about these suburbs had been. And then I saw something through the static that made me certain that city was the next target, as the camera panned over one of the evacuating neighborhoods, showing abandoned homes and some people still packing up. There was a flash of movement at the garage of one of the already forsaken houses. I don't know why it drew my gaze, perhaps it was subconsciously familiar. Whoa, shit, rewind! I exclaimed. Zoe rewound, let it play forward. There! I shouted. Pause. She did, and I pointed to the fuzzy garage edge. Zoe leaned forward to look at it too, and I knew from her expression that she'd seen the same thing I had. Disappearing into the garage was a man in a lab coat. A lab coat identical to the one Nolan had been wearing. Maybe this wouldn't look like the weirdest thing in the world to most people, but to us, it was a giant red flag. All the signs we'd come to recognize were there. And that was bad news. "Fuck," I said quietly after a long moment. "Fuck," Zoe agreed. Mr. Bailey jumped onto my lap and meowed. It wasn't a happy meow. "So, it's happening again," Zoe said. "In a matter of days that city is going to go through the same thing ours did. And they have no idea what's coming." "We could try to contact someone there," I suggested. "Email them, call them, something." She was shaking her head before I'd even finished talking. "It wouldn't work," she said. "Think about it. There's nothing out there about what happened to us, except your stories, which people think are fiction. We have no proof we could send digitally. A picture of Waffles or something would only endanger him, and they'd think it was photoshopped anyway. There's no way anyone would believe us." I knew she was right. I mean, if it hadn't all happened to me, I probably wouldn't believe it either. Do you all even believe it? I mean, I hope you do. But I can't prove it to you, just like I couldn't prove it to the residents of the next city. "So, what then?" I asked. "We can't just let it happen again. Not when we know it's going to." Zoe rested her head on my shoulder and took my hand in hers. "No, we can't," she said quietly. "But we can't stop it," I continued. "No, we can't," she agreed. "And we can't warn them in a way that will work in time." "No, we can't." I knew the answer. I think I'd known it since I saw the lab coat on the screen. I just didn't want it to be the best option. I sighed. "But we can go there and help them. Make sure more people survive. Find the elevator sooner and escape sooner. Hopefully get underground and destroy the rest of those bastards before they can move on this time." Zoe raised her head and kissed me on the cheek. "I think we have to," she said. "We owe it to my family. To your family. To Tristan. And to everyone else who died in that hellhole." I smiled. "Better make some more copies of my rules," I said. I knew they'd come in handy for other people someday. So that's what we did. We made copies, packed our stuff up, again, and scavenged together what weapons we could. We didn't have many left. Zoe had her axe, and I had my favorite knife and a pistol. The rest had been used up or left behind in our escape. A few more knives from the kitchen would have to suffice to complete our arsenal. And then we had no time to waste. We searched the empty neighborhood for a car that would fit Waffles. How the whole area has remained empty for so long is beyond me. Maybe they bought all the land once people had evacuated. Maybe they established it as some kind of exclusion zone, forbidding people from entering permanently? Until we found a pickup truck. Waffles laid down in the back, and we covered him with a tarp and tied it down. Really, unless you looked closely, it just looked like we were transporting a bunch of lumber or something under there. Neither one of us was really in ideal condition to drive, what with Zoe's arm and my ankle, but we'd have to make do. Mr. Bailey, purring, settled himself onto my lap in the passenger seat as Zoe drove. We would have liked to go straight to the house where we'd seen the guy in the lab coat. I mean, okay, I probably couldn't have recognized it based only on that fuzzy televised image, but I could have gotten us in the right ballpark at least. That would have been stupid, though. We were still recovering, though significantly better after several days, and had hardly any weapons. Even with Waffles and Mr. Bailey, we wouldn't stand a chance charging in there, not if the place would be fully stocked with scientists and monsters. I mean, no one alone we could take, but the rest of this evil, government-backed entity at once? No thanks. Not to mention that we barely survived our first encounter with all the monster species together at the bank, and that was with all our weapons and supplies. So, our best move was one that none of us were particularly thrilled about: make it to the city before the dome appeared, be inside when this all started, and use what we knew to help people survive. Ideally, keep enough people around to find the elevator and attack the organization with sufficient surprise and firepower to take them out and end their trials here. Easier said than done, though. We made it to the new city 2 days ago. I'm writing this on a computer in the house Zoe and I are currently living in. No, we didn't take it after someone died. It was empty and available for rent. It said so on a sign out front. And yes, it did have a camera, but Mr. Bailey found that and tore it apart like the little hero he is within minutes of our break-in. Okay, yes, we did technically have to break into the house, but no one was living here, so was it really a crime? That's why you may not hear from me again for a while. I wanted to post one more time, for closure for me and for you, but I've got bigger things on my plate right now. Like, for instance, the first day here, we gathered supplies. No dome yet. We went to a hardware store and bought as much as we could afford with the little money we had. It's not much, but hey, any tools and equipment are better than none. We stocked up on food, too, and barricaded all the windows to the house, including the one we'd broken to get in. We tried to encourage people we encountered to do similarly, claiming it was good preparation for the storm coming, but I'm not sure they listened. Might have thought we were crazy. Yesterday, it happened. Day 0. I think Zoe and I both had a gut feeling it would. We went outside in the late morning and stood there on the house's back patio. Waffles was beside us. He'd been loving the backyard, the fence was high enough and neighbors far away enough that he was pretty safe from public view. Mr. Bailey sat next to my mostly better ankle, tail curled around his paws, fur brushing my leg. And Zoe held my hand in hers as we watched the dome appear. I still couldn't tell you whether it shimmered into existence or descended or what, it was suddenly just there. But it meant we had seconds before all this began again, before it was time to fight for our lives and for the lives of everyone else in this city, strangers we didn't know but knew the suffering they would go through. Are we really doing this again? On purpose this time? We must have a death wish, I said. Zoe shrugged. Remember that quote about courage? We may be screwed before we begin, but damn it, we're gonna begin, and we'll see it through. We won once. And that time we started alone. She looked at Waffles, Mr. Bailey, and at me, holding my gaze the longest. Now we're not alone. We can do it again. Better this time. I love you, I said. You know, just in case things went downhill in the next few minutes. She smiled and squeezed my hand. I know, and I love you too, she said. But this is no time for rule number 1, because we're not about to die today. Come on. Let's go kill some of these motherfuckers. And with that she picked up her axe and took off towards the sound of screaming and screeching out in the street. Waffles eagerly followed. I looked at Mr. Bailey, he chirped encouragingly. Shrugging, I tucked a few bombs in my pocket and took my brand new pry bar in hand. Thanks Home Depot, only good thing you've ever given me. And then I was off after the girl I loved, with our monster companion and my not quite a cat, to kick monster ass and hopefully save this city from the same fate as ours. Because if I can prevent a few families from going through the hell that I went through, that Zoe went through, that Tristan went through, if I can find that elevator sooner and take down these bastards before they start the cycle over again anywhere else, well, then my year in that hellscape might just have paid off. To be fair, I got Zoe out of it either way, but you know what I mean. So, here's me, Eli, signing off. We've got a lot of work to do around here. I may write again, someday, depending on how things go. But for now, it's the end of the end. Thank you and good night from me, Zoe, Waffles, and Mr. Bailey, aka the best monster fighting team you'll ever meet. Oh, and just to leave you on a high note, fuck Caleb. Sincerely, Eli.